Hi everyone and welcome to my review of Yasujirô Ozu's Floating Weeds in 1959. This is a film that I've been wanting to see for many years now. It's just a case of me, I finally end of last year, I amassed, a good amount of Blu-rays, DVDs of Ozu, so I could kind of go on a spree, if you like, of his films. This was just, I guess, just one of the ones I didn't watch first, and this is my 11th Ozu, massive expectations going in here because, it's one of the most acclaimed films of all time, you could say, on a lot of polls and stuff, and it's got an 8 on IMDb as well. There are those who say, this is Ozu's best film, certainly along with Tokyo Story, I had massive expectations going in with this. I did have some doubts because I heard it was more a travelling group of actors, kabuki stuff going on, and I hoped Ozu didn't focus a lot of scenes, prolonged scenes of this sort of thing going on, the theatre, without any character things going on in between, amongst that play, the theatre stuff, because I've seen a couple of films that kind of do this. Mainly from Kawaguchi actually, this is also a departure from Ozu's regular work, so I was a bit nervous going in, despite the acclaim, because there's been a few films that are massively acclaimed and I've not liked, I had faith in Ozu. I doubted that he would not have relatable characters and stuff like that, but yes, it is a very different Ozu film after watching it. It's a lot darker, and the characters are they're not quite as restrained. There's quite a lot of outbursts of emotion in this film. Massive arguments, you could say, which is not really, a lot of, a lot of Ozu films. That doesn't usually happen and it definitely was in this. And of course, the actual class of people he's studying, these group of actors. Very different from his, everyday sort of family units and stuff and characters that he usually explores. I was nervous about this, but Roger Ebert, in one of his top 10 lists of all time, he would put this in the list. The other one, it was Tokyo Story. He had I've seen two different top 10s he published. One of them had Tokyo Story on it. This one, another one had Floating Weeds, and of course this is the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray that I watched it on. And I was a bit surprised it didn't have a story of Floating Weeds on it, this is a reworking of. I suppose that's more the BFI's ones that do that. Good Morning, I Was Born But, kind of double pack. I wasn't too bothered because although I do usually try and watch an original before reworking or a remake, I just thought let's just dive in. This is the most acclaimed one, basically, the story is these group of actors are travelling, and the main character, Komajuro, he's played by Ganjirô Nakamura, and he's kind of the main guy, and he visits this seaside town, on his kind of his tour of going in different locations to perform, but it's learned fairly early on that he's got a history with one of the women there. And pretty early on you find out that he's got a son there, who still thinks he's his uncle. He's not found out yet, the son, that's actually his father. And of course it's basically about dealing with past stuff like that, but there's loads of things that go on, twists and everything, because there's loads of hostility from this character, Samuko, and she basically tries to stir things up, and stuff, and loads of things arise. I won't get into, but it's it's full of twists. It's not quite a regular Ozu, you could say, in a lot of areas. This is probably along with this could be his most different film actually from his general types of films, and the way it's handled. It's more of a it's very much, at times it's a thriller, a mystery, a kind of a thriller, and then it is still a family drama at times, and then a romance as well, but not the type where usually there's someone trying to get married and stuff like that. No, it's very different, and it's it's related to that Sumiko character, who tries to stir things. She basically, sends this woman, played by Ayako, and she plays Keo, and she sends her in there to kind of seduce the son, Kiyoshi, the character Kiyoshi. She sends him there, and then it all problems arise then throughout the film, which I won't ruin. But yes, it's a very complex film in that sense. The plot, the way the things that go on. But yes, as I've said before, Ozu is one of my absolute favourite directors. I think last week or the week before, Tokyo Story was the time when he made it into roughly my top 10 directors. And that was my 10th Ozu film. And I think he's one of the absolute greatest directors. I think he's better than Kurosawa, although both are absolutely amazing. I just think he's very, very unique in his simplicity. But there's so much going on within the frame, as I've said before, that it's not really that simple. But on surface level it is. And there's just a way he eases you into this natural environment, and just everyday things really elevates. But yes, I have to admit I was a bit disappointed. The first 15 minutes I was, and I don't think this is one of Ozu's absolute greatest films. I don't think it's one of his masterpieces, unfortunately. But considering I did have some doubts and stuff, I came out. I won't give my score yet, but I was, basically the score is more than what I thought. It could be if it fell into them traps. But based on its acclaim, if I'd just been told it's another Ozu masterpiece, yeah, slight disappointment. The first 15 minutes, I think there's a couple of famous shots in there, and of course the cinematography is wonderful. And straight away, I was just wowed by the the colours and just the compositions and stuff. Soundtrack as well, although a bit similar to some of his other ones, not stand out. The soundtrack was very, very nice, and later on in the film it becomes a lot more powerful. But I just found the scenes on the boat and stuff when they were travelling, and there was these random people going through, and the leaflet handout bit, it was a bit generic, and it was good. It was fine. It was good, but it wasn't Ozu level. It wasn't great, and to be honest, the first 15 minutes was probably it's the weakest Ozu opening I've seen. And I was a bit hopefully this picks up, because we weren't really there wasn't much drive to the film. We wasn't really introduced to the main characters too much. There was loads of different people, of course. Usually he can handle that really, really well. Ensembles. But it was just the nature of it and the way it was done. It took a while for me to actually care, a bit. And, as I say, it was fine, it was good. And obviously standouts, the cinematography and stuff. But I was very disappointed with that 15 minutes or so. He had an appearance from Chishû, who's, just a kind of a very, very minor character. He doesn't really show up in the film. But yes, things weren't really set up too well. There wasn't, a lot of drive, as I say. And the main character didn't really come into... He wasn't really, the focus too much until that 15-20 minute mark where he comes into contact with Haruko, Sugimura's character, Hiroshi. She's basically his past flame, they say. Once that started, the film picked up and it became, for the most part, instead of apart from one main flaw I did have, it became another Ozu great for sure, and for the most part actually a masterpiece. There was one scene though, the kabuki stuff that was going on, one of the early ones, and I know this is trying to be like injecting a bit of humour in there, and it is basically meant to show how they struggled with this old-fashioned kabuki stuff to the modern audience and stuff. And there's bits where people are throwing things and stuff, but the first scene in that, I wasn't a fan of. I thought it went on for too long. First of all, it wasn't filmed really in a dynamic way, a way that, or even a way that Ozu is great at. The simplistic way. It just didn't draw me in, and unfortunately, one of my, my things that I was nervous about, it did happen. He focused on that, and there wasn't really character things going on, with anyone else, and it was very showy and a bit over the top, and that's not really Ozu. And it wasn't funny, really, the stuff that he was clearly trying to inject. Luckily, there is only a few more kabuki scenes in the film, and they are done really, really well. For comedy and stuff that's actually going on, within the characters and development. So it's really just that scene, and maybe one or two other bits of humour in the film, with this woman who's got dodgy teeth. They kind of make her like a comedy relief character. It doesn't work too well. Really though, apart from that and the first 15 minutes, as I say, it's not got really any flaws, and it is really a masterpiece, apart from them things. But unfortunately, I can't ignore, from start to finish, the flaws. But yeah, no, after that it picked up massively. The characters, as they weren't introduced perfectly, as I say, but they really picked up, and I cared about all the characters. The son, and the main character, the actor, very complex Ozu character, actually, one of the most complex. And he basically explored for the most part, the way art versus kind of just everyday life, perfectly, and the drama that arisen, with that mistress, really used to great effect for the drama. But yeah, as I say, all the characters are wonderful. They're not all fully likable. There is kind of, you could say at times, where you've got some villains, which isn't really an Ozu. Trait. He usually doesn't have characters you full on dislike at times. But there was in this. The mistress especially. So yeah, this is a very different Ozu film, but the script, once again, it was pretty much flawless after that opening. And all the characters are fully developed. You've got a great scene of exposition. The fishing scene early on with the son and the father. And it's just wonderful. And of course the dramatic irony that plays throughout the film, involving that, the son and that, and it's just really, really great. And other characters as well. And I just thought, why couldn't the first 15 minutes or so has been as good as this, but still a great film, and as well the soundtrack, as I say, the cinematography is wonderful. All the colours in this film, the reds, the greens, absolutely wonderful, as expected really from an Ozu colour film. Something about them that is just wonderful, and all the flowers in the film and stuff, the way that they play off of the actual buildings and everything, the contrast, nature versus like Ozu does, really wonderful. And the actual, just the way the film unfolds is at a really quick pace, and there's so much drama that goes on, and the acting in this film for the most part is stunning. As I say, the characters, they're more expressive, outbursts of anger and stuff, and especially the main character, Kumajuro, absolutely wonderfully played, and such a great character. Just enough control to stop it from going over the top as well. I suppose, of course, due to Ozu's direction, and the direction in this film, aside from that opening 15 minutes, is wonderful. The way that he handles all his themes. Again, family themes as well, but the way he explores the lives of actors and stuff, and he explores art in general, is really something. And the way he handles his themes, just with ease once again. And as I've said before, that's a mark of a great director who can just explore his themes, and just kind of make the film flow, and it looks easy, and that's what Ozu does when he's at his best, especially post-war films, of course. And yeah, this, I suppose, of all the ones I've seen, this is the worst post-war film, but it's still a great film, and I think Ozu was so great, even even the fact that I thought I was a bit disappointed with this, it's still a great film that he was working at such a level, that, you know, even though I was disappointed, basically, it's another great film. Definitely, just not a masterpiece, unfortunately. But you know, I think I've seen 7 already Ozu masterpieces, and I've only seen 11 films. So, you know, that says it all. You know, he's still one of the absolute greatest directors. But, you know, all the cast, as I say, is stunning, and you know, you've not really got the main, you know, regulars apart from Haruko Sugimura, and she's wonderful in this film as well. You know, such a warmth to her character, and just, you know, the way that she, you know, plays off of the different characters as well. But you know, it's these central relationships, you know, and the way it explores, you know, family and the father-son relationship. But you know, with a really unique twist, as in he doesn't know, you know, for most of the film that that's the case. You know, the son, and it's obviously hinted on him very early on and stuff. But you know, you've got so many standout scenes in this film. You know, the scene in the rain, the argument, as I say, the fishing trip. And just, you know, the whole end in 20 minutes is absolutely masterful. You know, a mastery of drama, you know, and just bringing everything together, you know, and dealing with themes, you know, regret and stuff. And, you know, the ending as well is such a great ending, a bittersweet ending, you could say. It's not, you know, full on sad. You know, there's never really been an Ozu like that, you could say. It's always, you know, a bittersweet, you know, I suppose, because, you know, Ozu's so complex. He never usually has, as I said before, you know, one note characters, and of course, the endings are always, you know, for the most part, you know, they're complex, you know, they're not one-sided. And I think really every act, apart from that first 15 minutes, and as I said, a couple of, you know, bits here and there, and early on, really, this is another Ozu, absolute, you know, stunning Ozu film. It's a great, but it's just not a masterpiece. And you know, everything from the editing to the, you know, after this bit, from the direction, to all the characters, you know, the way they're written, and you know, the performances. You know, in the end, I absolutely love this film, and it made it onto my list. Just not that high, you know, my 500 favourite films list. But it did make it onto the list, and you know, that's another, you know, 8 out of 11 films that I've seen of Ozu have made it onto the list. You know, Brothers and Sisters of the Total Family, Hen in the Wind, and then I think it was, what did the lady forget? They didn't quite make it onto the list, but I still, you know, really like them, you know, love them really. But yes, Floating Weeds, you know, it's a very acclaimed film, and you know, I was slightly disappointed, but also it did exceed my expectations of, you know, based on, you know, my doubts and stuff. So I was happy with the result. Floating Weeds is definitely a great film. I think I'll give this film though a 95%. You know, it's not quite top tier Ozu, but you know, it's still an absolutely stunning film, and the fact that it's not top tier, but it's still, you know, a 95, and it's his 8th best I've seen so far out of 11. It says it all, really. And you know, this may end up being one of his weakest post-war films, you know, that I find, but you know, that doesn't matter, because it's still an absolutely stunning film. And really, if I've got films like, you know, An Autumn Afternoon and stuff, The End of Summer, Tokyo Twilight, if they turn out to be better than this, then you know, he could even climb higher than my 10th, you know, favourite director. But as it stands, I think this is a 95%. I think it's a great film. You know, and I can understand why some people would say it's one of his absolute best, but you know, I wasn't a fan really of the opening 15 minutes, and you know, a couple of bits with the Kabuki theatre, really. So I can't give it, you know, a masterpiece rating. And it did, as I say, take a while, you know, roughly 20 minutes for me to fully care, you know, about this story, and it's just 2 hours long, so, you know, I have to kind of judge it overall, and the fact that it had a couple of flaws here and there as well, you know, it's not a masterpiece from me, but I understand, of course, if some people say that. You know, a lot of people say that, but a lot of people wouldn't say Good Morning is a masterpiece, and I would, so there you go, it kind of balances out. I'm not disappointed with this film, but you know, yeah, I just don't think it's one of his absolute best. But as it stands, Floating Weeds, definitely recommend it. You know, yeah, I would say go for the Master of Cinema one. Definitely, and yeah, it is a great film. But you know, the one that's not as acclaimed on that year, Good Morning, I think is a better film. And you know, the comedy film that, you know, most people didn't really take too seriously, you know, is more powerful and affecting than this, really, because I cared from the start, and it was more relatable. But yes, Floating Weeds is a you know, a great film, and another Ozu great for sure, and another, you know, reminder of why he's one of the absolute greatest directors of all time, and you know, I can't wait to see more of his films. Up next, you know, in terms of Ozu, I'll be doing probably The Only Son, and I Was Born But, and you know, maybe a couple of other ones if I watch them, you know, this week. But yes, thanks for watching my review of Floating Weeds on Master of Cinema.